All right, good morning, everyone. It's still morning. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful day. I think the clouds were lifting a little bit. At least it's not 120 degrees like it is in some other spots. So that's always nice. But welcome to Seattle Revit User Group, June edition. Halfway through the year. It's been pretty cool so far. So my name's David Diarsa. If you haven't met me yet, I'm president of the board at SeaRUG. For the time being, and for the last couple of years. It's a group of us that put this together for you, and I'll show you who they are in just a minute. And I like to get out of the way and let our feature presenter take over here as quickly as possible, because that's what you want to see. You don't want to see me rambling on. Today's agenda, you're obviously enjoying some wonderful lunch. I'm going to do a little bit of an update, and then we're going to hand it over to Kyle Morin of Unify, and we're going to talk about managing Revit content. And Kyle is back. Unify joined us as a sponsor last year, and we had a really great presentation, so we're really excited to have you back, Kyle, and looking forward to this presentation. Last year was great, and looking forward to building on that. Nothing here would take place without these fine folks up there on the screen. All of our sponsors really are the ones that make this happen. We've got the best venue of any Revit user group anywhere in the nation, I would confidently state. We probably have the best lunch of any Revit user group anywhere in the nation, I would confidently state. And that's all thanks to our partners, which of course keeps it completely free to you. So thank you very much to everybody, and thank you especially today to Unify. Heard me say something about the board members. You know, these are the folks up here that we get together every once in a while, and especially towards the end and beginning of the year, and set an agenda and set a tone, and come up with some policies that have been in place for a long time since SeaRUG has been around, and every once in a while we have to evolve them a little bit. But by and large, this is it's a group that's been running really well, and it's really thanks to these folks over here that volunteer their time. And join me to be able to host you. So thank you very much to everybody, some of the board members here today. And a pretty big announcement. This week we hit 1,000 members. We're 1,001 right now. So that's pretty exciting. So yeah, you can clap for that. Obviously, not all 1,000 members show up to every meeting, which would be kind of problematic. But we've actually gotten members now, because we put the meetings up on YouTube. And by the way, if that's news to you, we have, if you look up SeaRUG under YouTube, we have a channel where we put all the presentations. Usually about a week after each meeting, it shows up there and you can see it. But we've got members of SeaRUG. They're actually all over the globe right now. And people that tune in and watch after without having to be particularly in our region. So that's really great that people are finding value all over. So certainly tell your friends, even if they're not around here, that there's always ways to interact with our content without having to physically be here. I'm going to make another very quick announcement relating to the next slide, because I don't think that somebody told me that last time I didn't do a particularly good job of advertising this as much as I should have. But those of you who know me knew me from being at B&B for a number of years, and I sort of quickly glossed over the fact that I had left that company. So yes. I struck out on my own. I have a partner and co-founder, and we're out trying to reinvent the world on our own. So no longer at B&B, and there's my new email address, Twitter handle, any of that if you care about any of that. Anyway, won't harp on that very much, but that's created a little bit of a vacuum. So one of the things that we like to do here at SeaRUG is to try to connect the community to companies that might have a need out there. And my departure, while not exactly one-to-one, because they have moved somebody up from within, has created an opportunity. BN was a great place to be. It's a great company, very forward-thinking, fast-growing offices in Los Angeles and San Diego and up here in Seattle. And they're looking for a strong VDC candidate to do VDC coordination and push forward with their innovation initiatives. So Neil Gordon's email is up there, or certainly if you have any interest, you can always reach out to me. I can put you in touch with those guys. And Lee Scrutcher-Lewis, another great, very innovative and ably led group here in town, is also in the same predicament. So I think that the takeaway here is that if you are a strong VDC candidate, you've got some options, which is never a bad thing. This is this is a market where employers are finding it significantly difficult to fill good positions because there's not that many of us out there that really are up to the latest and greatest. So I think by being members of SeaRUG and coming here, a lot of you are very well positioned to fill some of these roles or grow into some of these roles and really be very marketable. Stick around after the meeting. We have a couple of Amazon gift cards that I brought in, and I've got the names of the RSVPs in an envelope, and Kyle, you will help me pick out a couple of names, and hopefully we don't have to cycle through too many to find somebody that actually is here, because you must be present to win. And yeah, there you go. You can just keep them. Yeah. I'll keep one. You keep the other, maybe. We'll hand out a couple of gift cards and send you on your way. So without any further ado, a really big thank you to Unify and to Kyle. And Kyle, why don't you take it over and get directly into the presentation, and that's enough out of me.
All right. Thanks, David. Thanks, everybody, for showing up today. Appreciate it. I know it's real difficult to try to come and hang out inside of a big auditorium inside when it's such a beautiful day outside. First day of summer. I know I wish I was outside playing instead of working, but here we are. So thanks again for coming. Really excited to be here again. Like David said, I was here last year about this time, or July, I think it was, and we had a really good panel talk about kind of best practices, problems, pain points, all that stuff, all centered around content management and Revit in particular. And so thanks, I know it's been a year, but thanks again for Chris and Rob, who I didn't see him here today, and Ben and all those guys who were on the panel. That was really cool. In today's talk, if you guys were here for that one, today's talk's going to be a lot more nerdy, a little bit more technical, but some really cool stuff that you guys can take back to your offices and start to play around with and work on immediately. Like David said, I'm a software engineer at Unify, and what I work on mainly is the deep Revit integration with Revit in our Unify platform. And there's my Twitter up there too, if you guys care to follow. And we're going to be talking about managing your Revit content with open source tools today. And I know that's a little vague, and I know, and it's kind of that way on purpose, specifically because this talk is going to be really geared around, even though we're going to talk about different tools and stuff that exist out there, it's really going to be geared around getting your mindset on this idea of version control. And we'll talk about that in a minute if you guys aren't familiar with it. But I want to talk a little bit about what Unify is and what we do for all of those that may or may not know. Just maybe show of hands. Has anybody ever heard of Unify in here before? Cool, a lot of you. Awesome. Is anybody currently using Unify? Sweet. A couple of you. Maybe we'll get that changed. Again, make sure you guys sign up. We get some free licenses going. But what Unify is what it is it's a content platform. And we say platform because it's not just a piece of software. It's not just an add-in with Revit. It's actually a cloud-based platform that addresses a ton of issues, all centered around the idea of content management, right? So when we talk about Revit content, we're not just talking about RFAs. Those are just the few pieces, parts that go in, but there's quite a bit more that goes into BIM, right? There's a lot of data that's centered around it. There's details, there's sheets, there's schedules, there's all kinds of stuff that actually needs to be in these models and in your Revit project in order for it to actually be able to be built, right? That's the end result, is a building. So we do have a big tenet of our system is online cloud platform and deep Revit integration. We pair that with another arm of our business, which is the Connect platform, which has been recently released, which is a way for you guys who are Unify users to connect directly with manufacturers and bring into the fold and use some of their content that's been vetted and QA'd and not from Revit City, which I know none of you ever do, and nobody in your firms ever use that. But you have a really good high-quality access point to great manufacturer content to use in your projects, and that's our Connect platform. And then we also have a kind of a third arm of that, which is our Create platform, which ties all together, and that allows you to ask for content, right? So if you need stuff built for your projects that need to go into it, and maybe you don't have the resources to do it yourself, you can utilize the Unify platform and get direct access to our expert content modelers who can create that stuff for you. You can track it, job cost it, and pull that back into your company and use those in your projects. And then lastly, we wrap it all up with the stuff that's really important is what we call insights, and that's all of our analytics across all of your content, right? What's good content? What's bad content? Where's it being used? Where's it not being used? Is my library functional? All of that really, really juicy stuff that you guys want to know as BIM managers possibly, or even as users that you may have an inclination for anecdotal evidence. We have the ability, because we're on a cloud platform, to help with that. So it's really neat. And just a quick slide here too. This is some of the people that use us around the globe. Probably a lot of those people are in this room right now, I'm sure, or you might know of those people. And here's a quick slide of some statistics that I wanted to share. I showed another one last year, and I couldn't find that one. I lost that presentation on the other laptop. But if any of you guys remember, I think you can see it on YouTube too, probably, but these numbers have actually exponentially grown, which is really cool to me, really interesting. Where now, hosted on the Unify platform, we have over 8 million pieces of content, whereas I think a year ago this time we were at maybe 3 million pieces, so we've scaled quite a bit in just the amount of content people are hosting on the Unify platform. And the other one that really struck me by surprise, because I hadn't been following this number for a while, but the insertions. So insertions is a metric we track of people actually taking content and putting it in projects. And globally, on average, we have that happen 50,000 times a month. So that's kind of interesting. People are really using Revit, apparently. So I want to show you a quick demo of what it is, just to give you guys an idea of the platform rather than me just talk about it and how cool it is. I have Revit open, cool. So, like I said, it's there's some really neat, I better log in. We'll open up a project here. So, Unify is a standalone application that's how it integrates with Revit. It's not just a direct add-in that you have to launch from within Revit. It can operate completely agnostic of Revit and help you manage all of your content that way. You log in, you can see all kinds of cool notifications. Here's the stuff we've requested. Like I was telling you earlier, we need some content in our projects that doesn't exist. We can track the status of that, who's creating it, if it's been done yet, and it can round trip back to us. But the biggest ability is our powerful search engine. So we kind of follow the Google model where, kind of the Gmail idea, put everything in one spot and just search for it, because organizing takes a ton of time. So if I wanted to add a chair into this project, I can just, oh, you know what? Yeah, I'm plugged in, cool. So I can just type chair, instantly sends me results of all the available chairs I have to use in my model. And if I want to add one, I'll just click it, and it'll dump it right in Revit. And then I can start placing it. Simple as that. That's where you get your 50,000 insertions. From there, though, we can actually use Unify to investigate this a little bit, right? So obviously I can get the name of the family, and I can see a little picture of what it looks like, but that might not necessarily be enough for me to decide to use that piece of content, right? There may be quite a few other pieces of information I need to make an assumption if I want to use that in my project or if it's even available to use. So we have cool things where we can tag, we do meta tags just like Gmail, where you can tag all of your items with as many tags as you want to help you search and find it and organize it. And we can also peer into the properties and the parameters of the types of each object that lives in Unify, so we can see it without having to, bring it in, open it in Revit, investigate, oh, that wasn't the right one, get rid of that, let's go look at something else. There's a lot of really cool information here we can see. But the coolest part about Unify, I think, one of my favorite parts, is the idea of file history, where we track the file and changes to that file from the moment it inserts into Unify. So we can see if somebody changed it, if someone made modifications to it, when, and what those modifications were. And then that's the part of the management that comes into play where is the most important on maybe QAing your projects, because I don't know about you guys, but when I used to do projects, there used to be rogue content that used to come into play all the time, or people used to use out-of-date content, and I would just pull my hair out for days and try to figure out where it came from, who put it in there, why is it not the one from our standards, and all that good stuff. So we actually track it here, and we can answer those questions really quick. The other really cool part is that when you're in kind of fast production mode and you need to get stuff and populate your projects, you don't always want to wait for that dreaded upgrade every time when you're doing batch inserts or something, or pulling in a lot of content that's maybe was built in 2012 and you now have a project in 2018. So every piece of content that comes into Unify actually goes through our system and gets upgraded and addressed for each version. So we have an individual version of every single piece of content specific for the version of Revit that you want to work in. So I'm working in 2018. I didn't know if you guys caught that, that this file was actually built in 2017, but there was no upgrade dialog because we took care of that on the server, which is really, really cool in my opinion. But the other thing, which is I think new since I came last time, there's been quite a bit of changes to it. One of the benefits, obviously, of being a cloud platform is we can iterate pretty quickly, but we've added schedule support, which is really cool. So now you can store and manage and track individually each of your schedules in your projects and just pull those in or out as you need to see fit. So what was that, a door schedule? I don't have any doors. I think I have a wall schedule here. Let me take a look at that one. So I can just bring these in from Unify and schedule my walls directly, which is cool. And then I can use this as my entry point instead of having to go, oh, where was that wall schedule that I had in that project from 2 years ago? And a real neat thing about that I like is that you can even check to preview what your schedules will look like before you insert them, which is neat. You can also harvest content out of your projects, which is one of the biggest advantages, right? So you gotta get it into the cloud somehow. So we can harvest the projects too, and again, we support all types of stuff. We support schedules, drafting views, detail views. You can pull those out individually, store them. It's really, really, really neat. Goes through, pulls them out, puts them into Unify so that now you can share them globally. And then I'll go back. I'm not going to actually upload that. One of the other things that was just released about a week ago, which is brand new. I don't know if any of you caught that webinar. A lot of you I know have heard about Unify and you may be following us, but we have a new feature called batch insert, where you can actually now take a bunch of pieces of content and start to populate your projects with that rather than doing them one by one. So, I can take 3 tables here and set them to batch insert. It's going to prompt me because 2 of those apparently were type catalog files, so I can go ahead and select the types I want before I push them into my project. These 2 apparently only had 1 type. They're all ready to go. I can now push them into my project, and they're all loaded, ready to go. So if you guys are real big on maybe project setup, you can quickly populate, your standard detail views, your standard schedules, your standard families, all that cool stuff inside of your templates, which is really cool. But it doesn't just stop there. There's obviously a lot of the management stuff you can do within the client. You can set up users, tracks usages, all that cool stuff in here. But we have a really neat web interface too that you can interact with all that if you got a lot of non-Revit users on your team, maybe that just want to help manage people or manage content or take a step back outside of the blinders of Revit, and you want to get maybe a higher level view of what's going on. We have a lot of the cool dashboard stuff we have here. You can monitor your licenses. You can get a few analytics on some of your libraries. What's the usage look like? You can get some cool stuff like that. And we also have, my token timed out. We also have a really cool feature that exists in the web app that allows you to track projects and who put what content in what project, when, what was the version of it. So you can, again, take a step back in a managerial chair and start to make sure that your projects don't have any stale content, out-of-date content, and that people are doing kind of what they're supposed to do. So you can see I had a SeaRUG project there, and it looks like I added the door schedule, wall schedule, one yesterday for testing, and that they are the current version, which is kind of neat. And then, again, one of the newer services we're offering is what I was talking about, Insights, which is brand new. We just started doing this. If you guys want to get signed up with this is really cool. You can do what we're promoting as a library audit. So if you want to get some insight across your entire company library of Revit content and get an idea of what's in there, what's the stuff that has like CAD links in it, what stuff's out of date, duplicate names, all kinds of stuff like that, we'll actually take our platform and pull it in and run an audit on it and produce some interactive insights into this, and you can get a really either high-level view of your entire library, or you can even deep dive as low as you want to into individual pieces of content and see, like, you know, maybe there's a firm standard that says no RFA can be over 1 megabyte or something like that, and you can dive in and get really detailed reports on that, which is really interesting. This is one of my favorite things. I geek out on this a lot. We've spent a lot of time, and it's become extremely helpful even for ourselves internally when we're QA and QCing projects. We can see where potential problems might exist. So this is all available through the platform, and again, it was just a really quick overview. I could probably spend 45 minutes on that, easy, just in the insights alone. But what's most fun is you guys want to get your hands dirty on it. Like I said, I mentioned it on the meetup. I mentioned a few people coming in, but everybody here that showed up today, you guys get a free Unify license. If you want to give me your card or sign up on the sign-up sheet, we'll make sure that after the meeting we'll send out those links, and you guys can get that to play around with it and get your hands dirty with Unify and see how it works, which is pretty cool. So that's Unify. That's kind of what I do day to day and work on that platform, which is a lot of fun. But we're here to talk about version control, like I said. And I'm going to make this statement, which I hope everyone agrees with, but I'm going to say that if you're not using a version control system, you're not managing your content. And the reason being is that for most of us, the idea of BIM management and Revit management and content management all centers around Windows Explorer, right? And Windows Explorer is not a content manager. It's not even, I'll even go as far as to say it's not a file manager, right? It's just a way to look at what sits there in your file system. And you spend a lot of your time as a BIM manager, or even as a user a lot of times if you're just working on projects by yourself and you're maybe the lead, of worrying about, you know, don't delete this file. Is this the most up-to-date one? Is this approved for my project? And all these ideas that you're given a tool that's handicapped that has nothing to help you with that. So you're not managing content. You're just flailing and you're moving files around, basically. So we can make that statement, right? But then you're going to ask, well, what's version control? What does that mean? Well, in my idea, for version control to exist, it's got to have three things, right? It's got to have history tracking of file history tracking. It's got to have file restoration, and it's got to have a little bit of collaboration built in, which means you got to be able to not be in a silo. You can't be just by yourself working on it. So just give it a little dash of collaboration. In other words, you can kind of think of it as time travel, right? So we want to be able to see what changed, what, where, and when. Does anybody know where this is from? What was it? Kung Fury, yeah, very good. Kung Fury, very funny. So, you know, we got to kind of, before we can dive down that path, though, we got to kind of understand the really typical workflow of quote-unquote managing content, right? Make some things, save some things. You're eventually going to have to edit or change those things, and then you save them again, right? That happens every time. And then you're left with something like this. Does this look familiar? Or am I the only one? Probably the only one, right? So, then you're left doing basically that, pulling your hair out. That's what I was doing for a long time. And so let's go ahead and let's introduce version control systems, right? So now we can see, if we start to implement a version control system, we can start to see what changed, why it changed, who changed it, and is there a backup of it, right? And I'm going to say another one, those .001 RFAs, .001 RWTs is not a backup. That is not considered a backup. Who just deletes those immediately after you see them? Exactly. So if we introduce a version control system, we can simplify our life quite a bit. Notice how this one looks quite a bit different over here. Now we have the stuff that actually matters. We have, in the previous slide, we had like 13 RFAs and 2 RVTs or something. And now we actually have what matters and what's able to be used, which is 1 RFA and 1 RVT. You will notice we have 2 new items in there, though, which are what we call dot files. And this is your version control system. This is the stuff that's going to maintain all of that, who changed what, when, why, how, and where. But now, instead of just using Windows Explorer and hopefully some carefully crafted naming in an Explorer view, we now can peer into it with a very robust tool and see that history over here. So here's an example of something that we have on the right here of history following changes to a website. So we can see kind of at the top is the newest, the bottom is the oldest, and we can see descriptions of who changed which files, when, where, and we can then dive in and see those changes to those files. And you can then be happy and win the internet, or in this case, win Revit. So when we talk about version control systems, right, then you say, okay, that's fine. What version control systems exist? Are there pre-made ones? Do I have to build my own? What does this mean? Well, from the description of the talk and also my personal preference is we say we're going to be talking about Git today, G-I-T. And you got, well, why Git? We can just quickly reference the Google Trends data source, and you can see Git is the, I don't know if my mouse will show up here. Okay. Git is the blue one, and this tracks search it, right, Google, so it searches on the term. In the early 2000s, Subversion was really, really, really big. There's a few companies that still use Subversion just because of their archaic practices, but for the most part, kind of in 2012, that's pretty accurate actually from my anecdotal evidence. 2012, 2013 is when Git really took off, and here we sit today with everything else down here, and Git by far being the most popular version control system. So all of you in here probably have heard of Git before. You may have heard the term because it is so popular. We're keyboard jockeys, right? So we've probably come across this term once or twice in our daily Google usage, and you might throw up your hands and say, well, wait a second, I thought this was only for programmers. No, it's not. And you go, well, obviously then it must be difficult to use and hard to learn if I'm not using it yet. No, it's not. And give yourself a pat on the back because you already probably assumingly know Revit, so it can't be harder than that. And it's really not. So honestly, the 3 things you need to get started with Git for managing Revit content: you install it, it's free, it's open source, it works on all platforms. You install it, gitscm.com. And then we're going to be installing a secondary tool that works just with Git. Same thing, it's free, open source, it's built on Git. It's called git-lfs. And the reason for this is kind of the key caveat here, is because LFS stands for large file storage. So that's going to come into play, right? How big are Revit projects? They're small, right? They're only like kilobytes. No, they're pretty big, right? RFAs can get pretty big too, especially if you're building some really cool, detailed superfamilies. Those things can get pretty big. So git-lfs will allow us to work with these large files in a better way. And then number 3 is basically you just set up to track your files. And I'm showing a really, really, really scary command line interface at the bottom, just to give you the shock and awe of how hard this is. And then we'll get into really easy. So you would just say git init. What git init means is you're just initializing that version control system, telling it, hey, Git, keep an eye out. I want to track some stuff here. You're telling git-lfs that, hey, track these files. I want to start tracking all of my RFAs. Treat these as large files. And then you just add everything to the version control system, and you create a snapshot. But don't worry, there's way easier ways to do this. I don't even do that, okay? I use a GUI, right, a graphical user interface. There's a few that exist out there, and I use these day to day, even when I deal with Git for programming. I don't even use the command line. So I put a few examples up here on some Git GUIs that are really popular and that work really well. Source tree at the top, because source tree is the one we'll be talking about today. I'll be demoing that and showing you some features of source tree and how they work together, and which platforms they run on. GitHub Desktop is also a really popular one. It's actually becoming really robust and really cool, but there's some caveats there, and there's a reason why I don't use GitHub Desktop, because of different web services it doesn't work with. And then there's another one called Tortoise Git, which works really well, but the caveat to that one again now is that it kind of has questionable LFS support. Nobody, even the developers of the tool, don't even really know how it supports LFS or not. But GitHub Desktop and SourceTree, they fully support that large file storage out of the box. You don't have to do anything, and it's really nice. So when you use these GUI tools, everything is very familiar, very intuitive. Just like if you're familiar with Revit or any other desktop application that you guys use on a daily basis, Excel, all of that good stuff. So don't worry, we'll get a lot more in depth in that stuff, and I'll show you how all that works in a few minutes. But we kind of want to wrap our heads around a few other terms before we get going any further. And the reason for these terms is that these will crop up a lot, and it'll help you understand the actual process and the workflow that we'll be talking about. So the main one is we need to think of in terms of where stuff lives, right? And you're going to hear this term branch, master, commits, merges, pull requests, all these really weird, scary terms that are really not that far out of line with the stuff we do on a daily basis, right? Sync with central, relinquish all, right? Checkout, work sets, all that stuff. In a weird way, it's exactly the same as version control system. So if anybody ever here use collaboration for Revit C4R or Revit Server for your projects, probably work shared projects, you are actually doing some sort of version control, whether you know it or not. And so if we think about master is like our living timeline, right? So let's think of these things as the little graphic at the bottom. You'll see the blue dots and the red dots. You can think of those as timelines. And each one can be like its own alternate timeline, if you want to get real crazy into like the space-time continuum theory. But master is kind of the stuff that's going to be, you can think of it as public, accessible by everyone, ready to go in projects, ready to send out to people. And everybody can see it. That's your main timeline. That's the one we're living in right now. And then you have these things called branches, where you can branch off that master timeline, and you can create alternate timelines. So you can take things off of the main timeline and start to work on them, change them, mess with them, audit them, change parameters, do all these things without affecting the other timeline, right? Because that's the whole goal. If you start to, if you need to make changes to families, for example, or say you have a detail that needs to be updated in your library, if you pull that detail from the main library and you start to change it, nobody can touch that now, right, until it's been updated, and you probably got to send an email, don't touch this, I'm changing it, or pull it off the drive or something, and so it's gone, and then you probably get an email or a phone call 2 seconds later and say, where'd that detail go? You're like, oh, I thought nobody was going to use that one for a while. But you can now do this seamlessly. You can pull that piece of content off the main timeline, not affect the original one, do your changes, and then you can do this really cool thing where you can reconcile those changes back in what's called a merge. So once you make your changes and you say, yep, I've fixed it, I've made these updates to my detail, I want to go ahead and make those public again, I can merge my timeline back into the master, and now that new one is available to everyone. And then each dot is on your timeline. Let's think of those, we're going to call those commits, because that's going to be your kind of like sync to central, right? When you're done working, you're done doing your changes in your project, and you say, okay, I'm okay with this, I'm going to publish my changes back to the server. That's kind of what a commit is. It's saying, take a snapshot, I'm done with my changes, or I'm good with the stuff I'm working on. Let's go ahead and take really cool, nerdy stuff with GitHub, which is why it's the most popular. And then there's an alternate one called BitBucket. And you guys may have heard this one, may or may not have heard of this one, but it's basically the next most popular. But the really cool thing about BitBucket, why a lot of people use it, is because you can have an unlimited number of private repositories, which means nobody else can see your stuff except for you, protect your IP, all that good stuff, whereas GitHub, you have to pay for private repositories. And it works pretty good for most people. I use both for different reasons and different people to share different things. Both work very, very, very well. I love GitHub the most, but I also like BitBucket. And again, your biggest difference is going to look like this. So if you're more comfortable with the interface looking like one or the other, that's honestly what your biggest gripe is going to be. So that's a lot of talking, right? Let's jump in. Let's start to see how this thing actually works. Before I do that, though, I did talk for a while. Is there any questions on anything before we get going? Yeah. The question was, is the content that's exported from your project shared with everyone else? The answer is only if you want it to be. You have complete control onto what gets, and I'll show you that actually here in a second, but you have complete control on what gets tracked and what doesn't, and what gets pushed and what doesn't. Sure, second question. Oh, I'm sorry. I took that question completely out of context then. That was a Unify question. Okay, back up. So I'll re-answer that question. We'll back up. Time travel. If you export stuff from your project, you push it to Unify, is that shared with everybody? Same answer, only the people you decide it's shared with. We have the idea of, I just closed it, but libraries, and again, I can answer all these questions. I can actually show you a full demo too, it's pretty cool, or when you get your hands on it, you can play with it, ask me, but you have the same thing. You have basically, we call them libraries, but they're basically repos, and you assign who sees which repo, and then you tell the content which one it goes in. So you can say, this office only sees this content, or this person only sees this content, vice versa. And then the second question was, refresh my memory again. 100%, yep. It's your data. Yeah, it's yours. Anytime, you can cancel anytime, pull it down. We actually have agreements with customers that have policies in place where they're required by the policies of their company to have local backups of their content no matter what, even though it's stored on the cloud. So we actually will then even provide them monthly backups of their stuff to store to meet their policies. It's all your data. If you want it, it's yours. We don't own it by all means. We're just hosting it for you. Does that answer the question? Cool. Any more questions while I wait for source tree to crash from being open for 24 hours? Okay. So, oh, yes, there we go. So that's a good question, and the answer to that is they're totally, completely in separate systems. We as Unify use Git as a version control system to build Unify. That makes sense. We use it to manage our programming source files and things internally. Unify itself does not use Git by any means, and you'll find out why in a few minutes. Unify is a complete standalone proprietary, we built our own version control system, the way we do files, because Git does have some caveats in it, and there's some very, very Revit specific quirks, right, that a general tool doesn't understand very much that we have to deal with as Revit users. So the version control that you saw that I showed for Unify and the way we track it is not Git. It is very, very, very different. We do not leverage the Git version control system in Unify. It's its own thing. It's the Unify version control system. Correct, we do. And oh yes, I'm sorry. The question was, and I'll summarize, correct me if I'm wrong. The question was, in shortened was, does Unify leverage Git as the version control system, right? And the answer to that is no. We have our own version control system that we built from the ground up that is specific for BIM content. It is geared towards the work we do day in and day out. Git is a very generic system which works for anything, but it's a great tool and can be leveraged for BIM content, but it does have its limitations, and we will come across that. So let me. So we have the thing that Unify understands a little bit different than what Git would understand is there may be different versions of a single. We'll even just keep it on a family for this explanation. But you may have a family that you built in 2014, 2015, maybe even before 2013 Revit or something. And you may try to go and upgrade that family to use in like a 2018 project or 2017 project, and it breaks because there are different constraints that Revit used to allow that it now doesn't. So that family completely obliterates, it breaks, maybe you'll lose some nested parts, whatever that may be. You know, you guys use your imagination, I'm sure you've come across this. So you now have this concept of you have two different equally named versions of the same family because they have to satisfy different things, right? You can't, because what happens once you fix that family for 2017, 2018? You can't go back, can you? So you now kind of have to have this coexistence of stuff, and generic version control systems don't like that. You would kind of have to weirdly maintain multiple master branches at the same time to have those coexist, and you have to maintain multiple like timelines, I guess you'd say, for every version, and it would become a nightmare. So Unify, we understand that, and we allow that to happen to allow you to have those coexistence of multiple families to be used in each individual version of Revit if you want, right? Because we know that happens when something built in 2014 breaks when you move it to 2015 because it has different constraint requirements. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Long-winded explanation. I can get a little bit in depth there, but yeah. So source tree keeps crashing for some reason. I might have to clear my cache. Let's see. I've had it open since last night. Maybe we'll close these out. And we'll actually give it some RAM here. Live demos, right? That's why they call these free tools open source tools. All right, what's that saying? 60% of the time it'll work every time? All right, there we go. Clear some cache. So I'll open up source tree over here. So here's a live example of all that stuff I've been talking about in source tree. I'll even show you the repository over here. So I think we can actually do like, let's see if we can get these to work together. And then we'll put this one over here. Okay. So here I have a folder on my desktop, And it looks very similar to that slide I showed you guys before, where it has those version control dot files in it. And what I've done is I've just went through those tedious steps of going git init, git LFS track, and git commit. So if you look, cool, it's crashing again. See if the older version works. I have never got these two to play together nicely on this computer. But let's go ahead and open this one up over here. Oh, it's the same door tag. So to illustrate this example the best this is the easiest. I'm tracking this door tag over here with a version control system with Git, and it's been added. I've taken an initial snapshot, as what that last line I showed you guys. So you can kind of see it opaquely through here. You see it's on a master branch. I have one snapshot, and it's the initial commit, and this is the default. I'm actually going to do this in the command prompt just to show you that it can be done here too. Cool. So I'm actually going to make a new timeline, okay? So remember I showed you that we had that master timeline, and then we could make the alternate timeline and do changes. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to make a new timeline, and I'm going to call this 2018 changes, because I don't know if you guys saw that. This file should be a 2015. Okay, yeah, see, it's a 2015 file, so it has to upgrade when it gets pulled into Revit. And we'll just say that I'm upgrading this to a 2018 tag, and I want to live that in my 2018 library. We want to do that. So I'll make those changes. Oops, because I can't have. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the changes. I'm just going to make this label say something else. And I know we're running out of time. We're a little close, so I'll make it fast. Save it. See it added here. I will take a snapshot of those changes. Right? Now I just made that snapshot timeline change, and I would show you historically and graphically how it works, but it doesn't like it, so I'm just going to do it here. You can see over here too, in our preview image, upgraded to 2018, now has that new view in there. So let's go back in time now, right? Let's go back to and see what was public. So if we go back to that public branch, what happened, right? Well, a couple things happened. If you noticed, immediately, I didn't delete any files, I didn't change anything, I just went to a different point in time. So now that backup RFA is gone. Why? Because it never existed at this point in time. It's not there. You might say, well, hey, your preview image didn't change. It's the same door tag. Well, watch this. If I open it, it upgrades again, and it has that old piece of content, because this is a different point in time where we just time traveled. And I can go back to that future, back to where we were again, really quickly. If I go back, I think it was 2018 changes. I can go now forward back in time to that snapshot, and I can get that piece of content. And that's how we track those changes. And we can then push those changes up to GitHub, and I'll show you that in 1 second. We'll see if this actually works now. You can see it visually. Hopefully it'll be nice. You can see what happened here. And then it'll probably crash again before we go. But do you guys see that here? We have that new snapshot in time like I was showing you with the 2018 changes. I changed it today, 12:36 p.m. Pacific time. I gave it a little bit of a message, new, whatever. And you can see that I modified door.tag, door-tag.rfa, and I'm now tracking that .0001 RFA. That was just for examples, but because I wanted to show you guys you can actually get rid of those and not track those files. You can tell your source control system what to track, what not to track, and via the UI is really, really, really nice. You can literally just like right-click on it and say, ignore these files, and it will ignore all of your .000 XXX RFAs and never track those. doing it via the command line is obviously also doable. It just takes a lot longer, and I won't show you that because it takes a while. And this thing keeps crashing for some reason, which was doing great yesterday, but that's life, right? So I know we're kind of a little bit over time right now, but right? We're good? Oh, we're good? Okay. All right. So that was real quick, and let's just deep dive real quick into some catches, right? So it's a little bit weird, but you know, we can say, oh wow, well that's great. I don't have to delete files. I can track each point in time now. I have this really great, awesome workflow to help me address changes, who changed what, when, where, and how I can share it. Great, this solves all my problems. Unfortunately, it doesn't, right? So version control systems are not a magic tool. They're just another tool. You still need a strategy. No matter what tool you use in your firm, you have to have a strategy. Just like Revit, just like you used to have with AutoCAD, just like you probably have with the way you do schedules, whether you use them in Excel or in Revit, you still need a strategy and a workflow how to implement these tools. It's just a tool. One of the other caveats that a lot of people don't know, and you get bit in the butt with this really more sooner than later, especially with Revit content, is because the version control system tracks your entire history and it tracks every file at every commit, it can get large really quick. And when you start to grow your repository and grow the amount and size and history of the files that you're tracking, this greatly degrades the performance of these things. So you have to really keep this in the back of your mind, that this is regardless if you're using this system for Revit files or you're using the system for text files. If you have 10,000 text files over a 10-year period of time, it's going to be slow, very slow. But one of the neat tricks you can do to kind of help mitigate this is, the key here is that you can have a lot of small repos, and that's a way better approach than to have one giant one. So you might not want one gigantic Git repo for your entire company library. You might want to split them up into compartments like my detail library, you know, my casework library, my tag library, and those can be all managed and tracked separately. And then if you even have a repository or a set of files that your particular firm, you know, edits and changes and iterates a lot on, you might even want to split that out further so as not to gum up the rest of your libraries, which is pretty cool. But you know, those are the things. Just like, you know, raise your hand, you know, make it clear that stuff happens. But other than that, it's a really great tool. It's really fun, and like I said, if it was really terrible, nobody would use it. But apparently, everybody uses it. So, you know, at the beginning, I showed a real quick demo of Unify. I showed that we do have version control in there, and I've also showed that there are open source options available that allow you to adapt these tools to our workflows, just like all other tools that we probably have in our repertoires to get buildings built, right? We don't just work solely in Revit and email within Revit and all that good stuff. We amount a collection of tools. So I just want to do a quick comparison of kind of the differences between them, since it was a very high level overview of each one. But Unify, you know, is a tool. We really built it for the AEC industry. It is specific to that. It is specific with people on our team that come from the industry, not just a bunch of programmers. We, at a very core level, understand the problems that exist in our day-to-day lives, and we built the tool to help alleviate those problems. All of our stuff is on the cloud also. It's unlimited storage. You don't pay, it's not like pay for what you use, any of that stuff. It's one license, you get unlimited storage. We are infinitely scalable because we're run on the AWS platform, and we are global, so you know, we can even scale it to, depending on where your office is at and the content, we can serve it out of those different data centers and meet all the EU regulations and be on GovCloud and all that really cool stuff. And it's one big seamless experience out of one tool. And we obviously deeply integrate with Revit. That's my job, and we actually, coming up in our next release, which is, we're calling it 3.0 in July, we're actually opening that up, and we're going to be deeply integrating with other design tools to help kind of bridge those gaps where we have right now. And we have, obviously, included support 24/7, 365 with everybody's license. So even you guys are getting your free trial licenses and stuff, you don't pay for support, it's just included. If you're using the tool, you get us support. I'm actually on one of the support teams, so If it's like Revit integration stuff, it comes right to me. You can talk to me directly. And then we talked about Git and some of the caveats, because Git really is it's a version control system, and it's a really great one, but it's not built for AEC. It's built for generic. So you can, designers use it to track Photoshop documents. Programmers use it to track text documents. In the academia, they use it to track research papers and share those amongst people. It's a great tool for generic usages. And then when you want to get into sharing via cloud stuff, you get services like GitHub and BitBucket, which to get the real meat and potatoes out of those, and to get privacy, you have to pay money for it. And on Git, like we talked about, scale actually hurts your performance, where the larger things get, the degraded the performance gets, and other tools that are built for it, that doesn't happen. Git kind of has a detached experience. As you saw, sometimes the tools work, sometimes you have to interact with the command line. It's not very good. Doesn't integrate with Revit, and your support is kind of left with Google. But it's really fun. If you guys like to get your hands dirty and nerdy like me, I've been using Git as Revit content management for a really, really long time before Unify came about, and it worked great. So if you guys are really interested in learning some more, there's, like I said, for Google support for Git is just infinite. You can spend your entire life like learning about it and reading about it, but some really great resources are the videos that are on the Git SCM website that walk you through. They're very high level, and there's even some really in-depth ones that'll go hours long, but they're awesome, awesome videos I would recommend. They have because it's open source software, and the community is very highly dedicated to helping new people get on board with this stuff. There's a free online book that'll walk you through every single thing you need to know to get on board with Git. And then if you're really interested with the GitHub stuff, there's GitHub on Windows, and they'll help you set it up and walk through it. There's a great webinar from the BitBucket guys that's on Atlassian that'll walk you through. I think it's like an hour-long webinar that can walk you through that and explain everything on how to use it, from getting started all the way through hosting and sharing on BitBucket, which is cool. And then if you want to learn more about LFS and kind of what that large file storage, how it works with other firms and things, like designers in Photoshop, there's a really cool video on YouTube for that. Or if you want to learn more about Unify too, I'm sticking around after if you guys got any questions, or you can go to our website and ask more questions that way too. And that's pretty much it. So thank you guys for your time very much, and I know we have maybe a couple minutes. I'll open it to some questions, or if not, I will be sticking around after. And again, make sure if you guys want some licenses to try it out, sign up on the sign-up sheet, and I'll make sure we get those to you. Thanks.